Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be starting a new series, which is how to solve trigonometric functions using product rule. So this is going to be a series with a whole bunch of episodes, and each episode is going to be a particular product rule function that is basically trigonometric function. So I'm going to do each trigonometric function question. We're going to derive it using the product or by applying the product rule. So the first thing I want you guys to do is copy all of this that I have on the first page in your notes. The first part is basically teaching you some of the very simple trig like identity information or trig expression. For example, this first side here that I have in like the yellow marker is just basically teaching you stuff like that. Then we have this one and this one, and then the next one we have is also more trig identities information, what each one of this stuff means. And then this very last one is actually anything in red is involving derivative. So as you pause this and write down in your note, just know what everything represents, and as you go through the series you're going to understand better. So that's it. Now let's first attempt the first question. The first question is, how do we find the derivative of, so f of x equals sin x multiplied by cosine of x. So basically we're supposed to apply this using the product rule. According to what we understand, the product rule involves the derivative of the first function. So f of x, when we want to derive f of x, this is what the general formula will look like, right, of the product rule. That's the derivative of the first subfunction, which is going to be f of x, right, the derivative of that first subfunction, multiplied by the second subfunction, which is not derived, so that will be g of x, plus the derivative of the second subfunction, multiplied by the first function that has not been derived. Now, if you looked at my other video that talks about derivative of functions that did not involve trig, I explained and I showed you guys that the functions would tend to have the general look like this. So it would be f of x, or depending on the f of x, f of t, f of s, f of m, f of z, depending on the variable that you're dealing with, right? So this is what it will generally look like. So f of x equals f of g multiplied by, f of x multiplied by g of x. So this is basically teaching you that when you have a function that looks like this, you're supposed to apply the product rule to differentiate it. So you apply product rule to differentiate. And this is here is the product rule application equation. Okay? So if you can memorize this and know this, it doesn't matter what they give you, whether it's a trig function, a polynomial function, an exponential function, or a combination of an exponential function and a trig function, and all the other stuff that we can combine to have two different subfunctions. It doesn't matter. It's going to go through the same process, provided they are multiplied by each other. You have to apply the product rule to properly differentiate it. So that's what I wanted to say first. So now we have f of x. So we're going to go back to solving. So we have f of x here, right? which is sine x multiplied by cosine of x. This is just basically going to be us doing the derivative of this sine x multiplied by cosine x. We're going to first of all do the derivative of the first subfunction. The first subfunction, by the way, what is that? The subfunction, if you want to compare with all these at the top, f of x is what? That's sine x. That's the first subfunction. And then g of x, what's that? That's cosine x. That's the second subfunction. And guess what? Whenever you're given a product rule, just like you can say sine x multiplied by cosine x, you can also say cosine x multiplied by sine x. It's like you saying multiplication of 5 times 2, you're going to get 10. If you do the multiplication of 2 times 5, you're still going to get 10. So it doesn't really matter the position that we have our subfunction. The answer we're going to get for the derivative of for sine x multiplied by cosine x, and we do that derivative, the answer we're going to get from that derivative is going to be the same thing if we switch it and say cosine x multiplied by sine x. But because of we want to have consistency in mathematics, that's why whichever way the question is given to you, we just assume the first subfunction is f of x and the second subfunction is g of x. But if you might mistakenly switch the position, you don't have to worry, you're still going to get the correct answer. So that's what I just wanted you guys to know. So in this case, we have, now to continue, we have derivative of the first subfunction, which is sine x, right? And we have that multiplied by just the second subfunction that has not been derived, cosine x. Then we have a big plus sign here. And then the derivative of the second subfunction, what is that? Is cosine x, interesting, multiplied by the first subfunction that has not been derived, that's sine x. So that's what we have. Now let's go to the second page. We're going to rewrite everything here. So we're going to do d of dx sine x, okay, multiplied by cosine x. I'm just rewriting what we did at the bottom. Then multiplied by derivative of the second subfunction, so cosine x, multiplied by the first subfunction, which is sine x. So we do both. So now what is the derivative of sine x? If we go back to the first page, now we're going to fish out derivative, right? Let's go fishing. Oh wow, it's the first one. What's the derivative of sine x? We find that to be cosine x. That's interesting. So let's go back and put that in. The derivative of sine x is simply cosine x. And I'm doing it in yellow since we're fishing. And then we just have cosine x. So we're just going to put that down here. No problem. Plus, what's the derivative of cosine x? What is the derivative of cosine? Oh, you're here fishing. That's is negative sine x. Not sine x, just negative sine x. So that will be times negative sine of x, right? When we have that, we now multiply that by sine x. Interesting. So now we do both. We end up with cosine square of x. You know why? Because we did cosine multiplied by cosine. So we have cosine square x. Cosine square x, right? I'm writing this at the bottom. Can also be cosine of x squared. We can do both. You can have both. Just so you know. So it's the same thing, but I like to write cosine square x. You can do either way that works for you, but usually you can, it doesn't really matter. It's not a big deal. So we have that. And now that we have that, we can now put this to be minus, because plus times plus and minus becomes minus. So sine x multiplied by sine x, same thing as sine x multiplied by sine x, the same thing as sine square x. Okay, so now this is our answer. Answer is cosine square x minus sine square x. Now, I want to quickly show you guys something. If you remember on the first page, I had this other extra trig identities. We can see sine square x plus cos square x equals 1. If you want to break this down and we want to remove the squares, say you have a professor that does not want you to leave your answers in squares like that, like in like square, square, square. So you can just look for something else to help you break it down, or just maybe make your work a little bit neater. Not perfect, just neater. So now let's remember that we said sine square x. And guess what? This one here, if you have this as your answer, that's perfectly fine. But since it's trig functions, you can play with the work, like play with your work a little bit, and it's flexible, and you can have multiple answers, but all the multiple answers are the same. So sine square x plus cosine square x. So it's just me playing with math here. It's 1. Now I'm trying to make it a little bit neater. So what I can do is have this to be cosine square x. I'm going to bring the 1 over the equals to sign, so it'll be minus 1. I'm going to bring the negative sine square x to the other side, so it'll be negative sine square x. Okay, so we end up with cosine square x, okay, plus, okay, you see the minus here? We're going to substitute it with this minus and put this whole stuff in here. So that would be cosine square x minus 1. So here you have 2 cosine square x minus 1. And the answer to this question, at least the answer that I'm putting here, you can get a different thing depending on how you play with the question, is this sine x multiplied by, so the degree of sine x multiplied by cosine x is what I'm trying to write. Multiplied by cosine x is the same thing as 2 cosine square x minus 1, or you can just say cosine square x minus sine square x. And you can also get a different answer as from this two. Just depends on how you're willing to play with the trig identity. So this is the answer here. This is also another answer. Hopefully this question is of help to you guys. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. I did it purposely so you guys can work. If you like this video and you want to learn more about product rule, you can basically go into the description box and click on the playlist for this series, or you can just click on it on the screen right now. And yeah, inshallah, may Allah make it easy for you guys. I wish you guys all the very best. If this video was helpful, you can subscribe. And if this video you'd prefer that there will be more added to it, or you would like to suggest something that could make the video better, you guys can put that in the comment section as well. You can also check my description box if you want personal tutoring courses, classes. You can join me on LinkedIn as well, and you can email me with any questions you have, or any opportunities for us to work together outside of YouTube. So you guys have a great day. I wish you guys all the very best in your courses, your assignments, and everything that you're doing. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.